is Hugh Herndon, and I'm joined today with Dr. John Legg, who is running for Pasco County Superintendent for the 24-25, starting with the 24-25 school year. Dr. Legg is an educator with experience in Pasco County schools. He's also co-founder of Day Spring Academy, the #1 public school in the Tampa Bay region. Dr. Legg has worked as a middle and high school teacher, a school administrator, a college professor, and a state legislator. All right, Dr. Legg, it's good to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks for having me and giving me this opportunity to have conversations about the topic that I'm the most passionate about, and that's education.
Yeah, and that's the point of the Teacher Mentor podcast, is to bring in other stakeholders that may not necessarily have a lot of experience with education, and honestly to try to address some of the attrition rates in the school systems, because we can get people in, but sometimes keeping them past 3 years, because when I started teaching 15 years ago, I think the turnover rate was like 50% within 3 years. And I don't think it's really changed that much. I think the numbers actually may have slightly increased after COVID. So hopefully through this podcast and through just different conversations, a new appreciation for education and what really is at stake when it comes to teaching students and things like that. So I wanted to get this going with, looking at your campaign website, what would you say is some of your goals going forward for Pasco County Schools, where we are now and then where we're going forward? So,
no, great. And if you don't mind, I'll answer that. Just kind of put a little context to it. Like many people of your folks out there, I was born and raised here in Pasco County, actually in Hudson, and I come from a pretty low socioeconomic background where education, was really just not much of an opportunity for me. And I saw early on that education just is really the skeleton key for success in life. And to kind of set that up of your question, which is a great question, where are we now and where are we going? If education is my first passion, my second passion is history. I think you have to look back at history to see where we were. When I first got an education, it was, 26 years ago. And it's hard to believe that was only 1999, but 25 years ago was 1999. And Pasco was a lot different back then. I mean, it was a lot different, and the model of education was a lot different back then. We back in 1999, for those of you that may have been from Pasco, or those of you that or from other parts of Florida or even the U.S., the educational model that was really dominant was kind of a one-size-fits-all model. You went to the school, you were zoned. That was it. There were no magnet schools in Pasco. There was no school choice. There was no charters. There was no programs. There was no CTE programs. There was no career academies. There was no innovation labs. There was no new academy for teachers. There was a one size fits all. You went to the school that you were zoned, and that was the only model. And back in, I was kind of young out of college and a young educator with a lot of folks, and we got together and we began to chat about, like, we'd like to do something new and different, and what would that look like? And I'm reminded of a story of Eli Wiesel used to talk about this, a Jewish priest that would go to the street corner every day, and he would say, "Hey, the times are changing, the times are changing," and a little boy would watch him. And over time, he would keep going out there, and that little boy would watch him day after day, saying, "Well, why are you no one's listening. Why are you saying this? He says, "Well, I'm not saying it because of everybody else. I'm saying it because of me. I don't want myself to change. I have to be responsible for my own behavior." And why I'm saying that is 25 years ago, a group of us got together and said, we wanted to do an art school. We wanted to do a school that was focused on high rigor academics. We wanted where teachers were invested into the school, where it was their school, where they can do innovative models. And 25 years ago, the only way to do that, the only way you could do innovative models was through a charter school. And so we started the first charter school here in Pasco 25 years ago. And, I'll say it's, I'm humbled by saying we've had a lot of success for it. And we want to expand that influence of that concept of high academic rigor, of teacher engagement, where teachers have that freedom to innovate, that they have autonomy in their classroom, where they understand that discipline matters, where that they can't teach content if you can't have your discipline is not reinforced by administration or the district office. And so that's the context by which I come into this, is that we've changed quite a bit in the last 25 years here in Pasco. We now have tons of options. We have CTE programs, and we need more of them. We have career academies. We have magnet schools. We have all those. We have those offerings, but they are still relatively new. They're relatively new, and if you look at it, they've only been around in the last 4 or 5 years. These kind of choice options. Prior to 5 years ago, to like 2 years before the pandemic, we really didn't have the quote unquote Pasco pathways. And so what you see happening, and people may say, well, I don't like it, or I do like it. It's the reality, is that education is changing. And that's kind of my wheelhouse. My doctorate is in education innovation, is how is the system of education changing, and how can we best move this large system, 90,000 students and 10,000 employees, to meet this changing educational environment? Because we may not want it to change, or some of your listeners say, like, I don't want it to change. The reality of it is changing around us. I mean, the whole educational model, not in Pasco, not just in Florida, not just in the US, but around us, is changing. The old K-12 system, the way we used to always know it, is slowly evolving. And unless, as Wayne Gretzky would say, unless you skate to where the puck is going, you're not going to get the goal. And so what I'd like to do, kind of that, where are we going, is where are we going? And let's kind of position ourselves for the future, and not just hold on and just complain about the past, and like, what can we do to position ourselves as these models are, whether we like it or not, being thrust upon us, and as our culture has changed in this next decade to 2 decades.
Yeah, that's great. So I've been taking some notes here, and I'm kind of piggyback on some of your points that you have made. So I think we'll start with the charter schools, because I have been working in 2 different districts. I've seen either, I don't know, I wouldn't say a uniformed, but there seems to be sometimes a general consensus in public schools that charter schools are like the enemies of public schools, right? And so it's like it's an either or, it's a binary decision. You can either have well-funded public schools, or you can have charters, but you don't have it both. And so I've always been of the mindset that if we had a really robust educational platform that offered the services that we actually say that we do, that we would win hands down. I think to some degree, public schools have benefited from a lack of competition because, to your point, it's been a neighborhood school. You're zoned for that neighborhood. And if you look at Pasco, or you look at Florida or the US, like, competition generally does well for businesses. It helps, the consumer choose the best. So I didn't know if you wanted to speak about charter schools in particular, and what your particular take was on them coming in as now the superintendent for the public school system, and see if there's any type of how you address potential criticism of public school teachers saying that, well, charter schools take money away from the public school system.
No, and I think that's a great question. This is one of the reasons why I'm running is just to have these conversations. First and foremost, as you may know, but not everyone knows, charter schools are public schools. I mean, they follow the same rules in terms of teacher credentialing, assessments, all those areas. The only difference is we get the flexibility of curriculum. We get the flexibility of hiring of teachers. We get the flexibility of how we enforce the rules. We get flexibility in the models of education that we have. As I said, 25 years ago, there was no art school. So we were the first art school. There was no early college programs. Here, Dayspring, all of our students graduate with an associate's degree. And we are in West Pasco, a low-income community, because that's my passion, is low-income areas as well, where kids like me did not have an opportunity for higher education, where 90% of our students are first generational students that are graduate with their associate's degree 2 years before they graduate, with their 2 weeks before they graduate with their high school diploma. And we help them get a Bright Future Scholarship. And these aren't wealthy kids. These are low income kids. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it is, and I will respectfully disagree with that argument, is that's like saying, well, if McDonald's was great, they should be able to offer chicken sandwiches, they can offer salads, they can offer burgers, they can offer all of it. Yes, they can. But McDonald's will never be able to compete into the quality and to the satisfaction as Chick-fil-A when it comes to chicken sandwiches. They just won't. Why?
Right.
Because you can't be all things to all people at all times. Any teacher who's in a classroom, which look at the variety of students that you have in your classroom, and what's happening in education. That's why the public schools right now and for current superintendents, current board, current folks, they've been adamant in the last 5 years of saying we have to be more innovative and offer more programs. Why? Because these other quote unquote charter schools, people like them. They want to go there. Why? Because they can go to Dayspring and get an associate's degree and focus in on the arts. And they have problem-based learning, and they have these different type of innovative models that work. Why don't we do that? And so what happens is charter schools will never be everything. And I don't want them to be everything, but you do need options for parents to choose, because your traditional public school model will be like McDonald's. They'll try to be a jack of all trades, but a king of none. And that quality measure will not be there. And the one thing that I push back on quite a bit is it's like, oh, well, even people that are quote unquote pro charter is, well, competition is good. It's not competition. It's collaboration. And I'm in education, and I believe in collaboration. We at Dayspring, we have a wonderful working relationship with our school district. And we have for 25 years. Our board is locally run. All of our board is primarily parents and teachers. Public school teachers that are actually work for the public school system are on our board. And what it is we're able to pivot. We're able to respond to the community quicker, to the needs. I go back about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, right before the pandemic, we launched a program called Hope is on the Way in West Pasco. Why? Because in West Pasco, there's schools are chronically underperforming. If you look at the West Pasco schools, they're chronically underperforming. And we said to the school district in a kind way, but a firm way, that is not good enough. We will do it. These are our kids. These are our community. We are going to do something about it. We're not going to wait for the bureaucracy. We're not going to wait for a school district or a superintendent. We as a community are going to step up and do something about it. And we did. We have high-performing schools that are there. This year alone, we have a waiting list of almost 3,000 students trying to get into a school that only has a few hundred, less than 100 spots. And these are low-income areas. And no amount of how much money, and the classic argument is, well, if we just put more money into the existing model, they'll be able to meet the need. They won't. Because why? They can't be innovative. The bureaucracy of a large system, and many of your listeners may not know this, but Pasco is one of the largest school districts in the U.S. Most school districts have less than 15,000 students. So you can pivot and adjust to the community needs quicker. You can't pivot a 90,000 student school district quickly to meet the needs of the unique characteristics of Hudson and Holiday, Lacucci, and all these areas fast. You can move there, but it takes time. So the reason why I'm passionate about it, I believe in something that's called a portfolio model. And a portfolio model is a research-based model which says we have a bunch of types of schools that are all public schools, They're all free and accessible to education, but we recognize that one size does not fit all. One type of school does not fit all students' needs. And Pasco has been moving slowly that direction in the last 5 years. And not that I believe you should look at polls to see like, hey, is this what people like or don't like all the time? Because if you do that, you're going to be, vacillate with the wind. But the polls that we've seen is people love their CTE programs. People love their career academy programs. People love their new academy for teaching education at River Ridge. Look at the Pasco pathways. Look how successful that has been in the last 3 to 4 years. They would not have done that. They would not have done that at all if it was not for charter schools here in Pasco. And for the argument was, there's only about 8,000 students of the 90,000 students in Pasco right now that are in charter. And even 5 years ago, it was half that amount. And that little bit has caused the school district to pivot and offer more of those unique choices that people are wanting.
Yeah, you were talking about the idea of pivoting, and you mentioned this just a moment ago about the culture and how, and I think that is, for me, I've always been an advocate of CTE, that college is not for everyone, and this, and I've taught all types of courses, and it always strikes me that still, to some degree, there is a pervasive mindset that you have to go to college and you have to get a 4-year degree, and that right there is the measure of success. And for a large majority of our students, that is going to be the route they're going to take. But when you actually can have conversations with them and you go, well, I don't really like this, I don't know what I want to do, and that's one thing that I think the culture shift has to incorporate, is not only the students, but also like to the parents and to those that are feeding into this mindset, because there is a lot of pressure put on students. And I've taught 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, but I mean, it can go down to 9th grade that you're in an honors or you're taking AP because you've got to get to college and you got to get through the next 4 years to get to college. And then they get to college and then they're just plugging away. And it's like, they're spending 6, 7, 8 years of their academic life not really learning, which is what we want them to learn, to be lifelong learners, not really enjoying it. So I think there's a lot of what you're saying about the culture change that also is outside of the district. But you're right in the fact that it's hard for a large scale district to pivot very quickly. And I think to some degree that's where there's maybe some pushback from some teachers. Is I think there's a mindset that charter schools have. They take away, they have all the freedom, they have all this freedom. And I think at some level, it's a little bit of jealousy. It's like, I wish that as the subject expert in the room, I could have the autonomy to realize, my second period class is struggling with this. I need to make the pivot and teach something and not have to go through 4 or 5 different layers of bureaucracy to make sure that it's approved, that it's vetted, and there's checks and balances. I can understand why, but the expert in the room has, I no longer feel that that's kind of the mindset of most large scale institutions. It's more like you're just kind of the facilitator and we just need someone to kind of facilitate the course and you're in.
Teachers are not cogs in a wheel. Teachers are a professional in a room. I mean, and we have to get away from that mentality. And I think the larger the bureaucracy, the more it belittles our professionals and it doesn't allow them to have that freedom. But the one thing I want to kind of clarify, and again, this is why I'm running, because I want to have these conversations, is you set up, and I'm going to use your language, is it's either a 4-year degree or nothing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you said it that way. I don't think that's the binary choice. Mm-hmm. What we have to say is, I believe all students need some sort of post-secondary education. Now, that is not a 4-year degree. Okay. And there's a big difference. A post-secondary education, as you know, but maybe not all your listeners know, is some sort of education beyond high school,
Mm-hmm.
some sort of credentialing. I had the good fortune of working, several years ago with the governor of Kentucky on a program called Credentials for All. And what we did is we laid out a model for CT education. That's what we did. Is what we said is we recognize that people have this kind of intuitive, I'm going to college or I'm not. Okay. But what we have to change that mindset is I may not be going to college, but I still need something after high school. I still need some credentialing. I mean, you look at your HVAC people, your welders, your kind of your tradespeople. They don't go out of high school and go right into that field. They have to go through training, and that training is still rigorous, meaning it still applies skill, it still applies knowledge, and what happens a lot of times is we bite into that sound bite of, oh, what's a 4-year degree, so they don't need anything. Well, no, because poor kids like me, where I come from, we need something beyond high school. We need some training. We need some CTE options. And the best way I feel to do that is to embed it into high schools. And this is part of that culture shift that, I've really been talking about for about 6 years now. And looking at research, I've been doing some focus groups and study groups and working with people around the U.S. on this. The concept of our 11th and 12th grade model is a dying model. If you look at the Europeans, they've recognized that earlier. They've recognized that, hey, a 4-year high school where you're taking all the core subjects to spread out over just 4 years in 11th and 12th grade doesn't really work anymore. Now, that's not to say you don't still teach those subject areas, but starting especially in the 11th and 12th grade, you've got to start embedding career programs like CTE, whether it's technology-based, whether it's medicine-based, and you've got to bring almost college level work down into the high school, because I really believe in this is something called orienting reflex. And this kind of orienting reflex, and I see it every day because I still teach college courses, I still teach high school courses, is you take a student who has never been exposed to college, you put them in an environment where they are exposed to college CTE, I call it post-secondary work, any post-secondary work, and they recognize, I can do this. I have the skill. I'm able to succeed outside of a high school setting, and thus that stigma and fear goes into it. Because what we see, and this is a culture thing that we see, and again, there's a report that I worked on and worked with people on called The Lost Decade. You see so many people that basically they get out of school at 18 and they like, oh, I'm not going to college, so I'm out of school at 18. All of a sudden they hit about 31 and they realize that, hey, they're not going to be able to make it at $15 an hour anymore.
Yeah.
And they have 2 kids and guess what they're going to do? They're going to go back, not go to college, but they're going to get some sort of credentialing. And if we can get that credentialing earlier, you don't lose a decade. And that's, now, again, that is not college per se, 4-year liberal arts university, but it is post-secondary education. So I am committed in every fiber of my bones to ensure that we have credentials for all, that all students have access to post-secondary education and that they're exposed to it, because I don't want to see a generation of young people thinking, I have to go to Duke University or I have nothing.
Yeah.
They've got to there's a big in between.
Yeah, and that's what breaks my heart as a father, because I've tried to impart with my children the idea that college is an option. You need to have some trade, you need to have some skill, and they're not in the conventional way trade, but you need to have something to be successful. And I try to impart that with my students when the opportunity arises, because like you said, like they're so fixated on either college success, no college bad. And I don't know, you probably have been tracking like with Mike Rowe and his Mike Rowe Foundation, the idea of trying to bring trades back, and what you're talking about, it almost seems to some degree like like in middle school when I was in Pasco, we had like a wheel, and so there was like a vocational opportunity, and you got to learn. And I think to some degree, we have a lot of students that don't have a lot of exposure. You were talking about orienting, like they don't have a lot of opportunities. So it's like they come in with a mindset of, okay, so you're going to be, a STEM major, and that's what it is, and that's fine. But for a lot of students, they're learning about themselves. They're just growing into who they are, and they have to choose a path, and they have to choose this one path. And if they don't choose the path, then it's like, well, high school, and then kind of just figure out, if you're not going to college. And it's disheartening, because that's not what I think education was. I don't think that's what education is. I think that's what education was set up to be. Education, in America, this as well. I mean, we needed factory workers, and we needed, mass production, and we needed, just everyone just learn how to hit this button, strike this, and move this. And to your point, high school hasn't really pivoted a lot from that model. And so you talk about like a lost generation. I see students now that are burned out at 10th grade, 11th grade. And I don't know if it's a combination of COVID, I know it's got to be some family support like that. If they're not getting that support, if you don't have anyone that's really advocating for you and trying to challenge that person to grow at 15 or 16 or whatever the age, right? But then they're in a system that is preparing them for like college, and I just don't know what I want to do. And it's like, it's just they're defeated at 14 or 15. And I'm just sitting back there going, my gosh, like it's so changed. Like it seems like it has changed, where it's becoming a continual basis of a lost generation. Like we're just adding to this lost generation.
No, I think you're, our culture, we have to recognize that our culture has shifted. One of the conversations that I have with a lot of folks is, they look back and they think like, oh, high school is going to be like Saved by the Bell or High School Musical. And it's not. The high school has changed quite a bit. Maybe 9th and 10th grade is still like that, but 11th and 12th grade is completely different, or it is becoming more different, where students need that opportunity to grow. And one of the things that I've seen is we don't give our students the credit that they deserve. And I mean this because I know it's hard. I'm in the classroom all the time with behavior issues and stuff, but students can rise to the level that you put before them. And I'm not saying you put calculus 4 in front of everyone, but when you put challenges and obstacles, I'm a big believer in this phrase called pursue what is meaningful, what is not as expedient. When you pursue things that are meaningful and that have rigor, that have merit, that have concepts, students know when you're giving them when you're blowing smoke at them and you're giving them false praise and you're giving them a ditto that a second grader can do, and you're saying great job in 11th grade, and and then what you have is you have a real quick differentiation between the haves and the have-nots. Those haves that have the support systems, that have they're not first generational scholars, they're going to get the resources and they're going to move on. But the have-nots, they're basically now stuck in neutral for a couple of years. And what I mean by this isn't like my theory. This is what's happening. This is what's going on. You go to any high school and you see that 12th grade is, for the most part, become a remedial grade for many students. Either you're taking remediation or you're taking advanced work, AP courses, in order to get ahead in college. So if you go back in time, and again, our memory is so short, less than 5 years ago, we didn't have these CTE programs here in Pasco. We didn't have, we may call them VOTEC, but they're not the same level of VOTEC that's today. VOTEC, it's not your daddy's VOTEC. It's a different type of, industry certifications, trade program, CTE. It requires work. It requires dedication. And students that may not be quote unquote college academically inclined, they're still not dumb. They still are smart kids. They just may not have that intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. And by providing these pathways more, it helps them. Now, the thing that I'm going to give Pasco credit for is we've started to go down that road. I mean, we now have 3 schools that offer those type of programs. 5 years ago, we had none. We had none 5 years ago. So we have to accelerate those options there, and we have to drill down at a younger age. And this is
Mm-hmm.
we can challenge more, meaning in middle school. I feel like where
Yeah.
we're really losing our students academically is between the late 5th grade and the early mid 9th grade years.
Yeah.
Because you look at your schools, most schools are very pleased, parents and teachers with grades K through 4. Now there's issues. I mean, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
there are issues in pockets. But when you hit that 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, those are so developmentally developmentally important years. And you can see our scores, and scores aren't everything, but they are a mirror that reflects what's happening. You can see our academic scores starting to plateau around the middle of 5th grade, going into 9th grade, and then it bifurcates where you have kids that are excelling and then kids that are tanking about mid 9th grade. So we have to look at how are we addressing those issues in the middle school grades, if you call them middle school grades. For example, one of the innovative models that we're doing, and I'm like, I can't wait to do some research to get the numbers. We've basically did away with 8th grade, meaning like we now, high school for us is considered 8th grade. And the reason why, because at Dayspring, the reason why, I'm not saying it's for every school, but we saw that academically, emotionally, socially, they weren't middle schoolers anymore. They were young high schoolers. They wanted to have rigor. They wanted to have challenge. And so we are an 8th through 12th grade high school program. And then what we've done is we've really focused on 6th and 7th grade to do a lot more supports, resources, identification, and remediation in those grades to prepare them, because that's the grade that we see and I'll say we, it's not everyone, that we lose students in those 6th and 7th grade years to prepare them for the success later on.
You mentioned rigor a couple of times, and even a discipline, and I think to some degree that is my frustration as a teacher is we will use terms like rigor and accountability, and I think it's like a bumper sticker, like we're looking for a word to kind of fill but in the classroom, I don't know if honestly, and again, I can only speak to me and to my experiences in schools, but I don't know how much we really want to hold students really accountable for a couple of different reasons. One, if you do hold them really accountable, then those test scores that we're very fixated on may go down. Mm-hmm. But then also, if we do hold them accountable, then we'd have to acknowledge to some degree that the curriculum, the content, that we're not meeting the need for them. And I think that's why a lot of times they check out, because you talked about in middle school and 9th grade losing them. And I think for a lot of individuals or a lot of students that I have seen over the years, at some point those students check out mentally because they realize it's too easy and they're playing the game, if you will, and it's not authentic. They're not really challenged, but they are in the challenging courses, if you will, right? And so then it's another issue. So I'd like to see that autonomy to the teacher, so that we can actually hold students accountable, not so that I can give out more Fs, but so that I can actually make the A worth the A, make the grade worth the grade. And I think once you actually do that, because you were talking about, you'll have to say the quote again about the not easy and expedient. And I think for a lot of students, a high school diploma is kind of like a guaranteed, if I don't do well, there's credit recovery, there's Apex, there's all these different programs. Like you have to be, from my experience, intentionally trying to sabotage your academic performance at some pretty extreme levels before the school will say, we need to move on. We need to try other avenues. And so I think for a lot of students that are in the middle, right, not the kids that want to go to college and things like this, But for the kids that are in the middle, they don't see the payout because it's like, it's here. It's, I don't have to really try. I can just turn in a paper and get a minimum 50 points on the assignment. I don't really have to try, and things like this. And so I think when you talked about accountability and discipline, that's where I see it, not in a punitive fashion always, right? But like, this is a benefit. Like I was trying to tell my students one day, like, going to the gym and taking a selfie of yourself at the gym is not actually the gym experience. Like, it looks great on your social media, it's a nice way to get the humble brag and get the likes and get the post and things like this. But the real workout is not when you're posting about it, it's when you're actually, that's the real effect.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is not just an opinion. It's backed up by research. Grade inflation is real. And I don't want to sit and give you all the research behind it, but you can Google it yourself. Even our higher educational institutions are wrestling with this. And there's an old NPR kind of radio show called Lake Woe Begone, where everybody is great and everybody's above average. And we suffer from that quite a bit, where we as a system, say everybody's great, everybody's above average, but in reality they're not. And while this is an election, and I want to make sure I'm clear and very precise and use precise language on how I say this. Some of the problems that we have been self-inflicted, and I want to make sure I say this correctly and not harshly. If you look, of what has happened in our classroom over the last decade, we have become so coddled the way we've treated our students. And I love parents and I love our students, but what we've said is, if you're not able to succeed, we have an excuse for you. We will give you a 504 for almost anything. We will give you some sort of label that will allow you to have some sort of reason why you're not able to be successful, or reason why you don't have to struggle or strive or overcome. Now, I want to be clear. That's not saying we don't need 504s and we don't need ESC. Right. We absolutely do. But I feel like we're almost handing them out like Tic Tacs now. I mean, and when, you just can't tell me that out of a class of 20 kids, that 15 kids have to have a 504 and an ESC in an average classroom, or 30, in a classroom of 30 where 20 of them have it. So we're saying 2/3 of our kids have some sort of special accommodation. What we have to make it so that they don't have to meet the same bar as everybody else does. And these accommodations, while we need to have them, they're not an excuse for not achieving. I mean, I believe we need to allow some sort of accommodations here and there, but the reality of it is, in the real world that we live in, we don't get all these accommodations. And so now there's a big difference between kindergarten and 12th grade. So there's a continuum of development. There's a continuum of supports that we need to do. But we've almost over-supported our students to a point of excuse making, to where if you give them an F, it is the teacher's fault for not following the 504, the ESC, all these other things, where it maybe it's the student's fault for not doing the work. Maybe it's the student's fault for, and I dare say, having too much extracurricular activity. And my son plays hockey, my daughter does dance, but at the end of the day, they have to do their schoolwork. They have to do those things. And I tell my son, who struggles sometimes in certain subjects, and my daughter, is the struggle is good.
Yeah, we call it productive struggle.
Yeah, the kids know that. A B is not bad. A C is not awful. Yes, no. You're a C in calculus, to where you are struggling to get that concept, is a whole lot better than an A in a phone-in math class. And I will take that any day of the week, So
we're calendar-wise, we're getting to the midpoint, and so students, this is when they typically check, right? Their grades, midpoints, and things like this. And so I will have students that are freaking out about not getting an A in a class, and I ask them, say, do you ever know what the A stands for? Like, A is excellence, and I'll talk about the distribution curve, and and the fact that we really shouldn't have. And I said, this is. And I will say, this is part of the system's problem, is that we've enabled you to believe that everyone is an A. And I said, if I were to tell you
in every subject, too.
And if I were to tell you that I have a car that will never break down, it will be dependable forever, that it is the best, the best, the best, then you would go, no, that can't be. If I said, I will sell you a house, I'll sell you any product and it will be the best, it will always be the best, you'll go, that can't be. And I said, how is the same expectation of you as a student to be the best in every subject?
Mm-hmm.
How is that a reasonable expectation for you to be able to do that? And then to your point, you know, to some degree, you know, I've told students, because I teach English, I said, you know, your best in here may be a B, and that could be because, quite frankly, you just don't like my subject, and that's okay, you know. And so a B is going to be get my parents off my back. I really don't like English, don't like writing, don't like reading, and that's okay. I mean, maybe you're math or science, or you like dance, or, you know, you're into sports or whatever. That's fine. But we have to get away, I think, from that idea that success has to be the A, and that we have to, like you had talked about coddled. I was just speaking to, I have a couple interns this year, and she was noticing the behavior of students working on an assignment, and I said, well, there's a couple of reasons why you've got students that are not working as productively in your other classes. And I said, and I listed some different reasons, but I said, I think primarily it's learned helplessness. They're so used to a teacher or some type of a system that is designed to support, but instead of taking that support, we've taken away their ability to learn, to have that productive struggle, to get a C in a class. And it's like, you can get a C in a class, and I tell my students this all the time. I go, colleges don't care about your quarters, it's the semesters. That's what they're looking at. And I go, you're not getting into Harvard because you got a B in English too. You know, it's a combination of reasons. Yep. And I said, why would you honestly want to go to Harvard? I said, there are plenty of other schools that can give you the same education for a fraction of the cost, because a lot of my students are not wealthy. So the idea of them spending $150,000 a year is unrealistic, you know? And so I'm like, we need to have a more balanced approach to everything when it comes to education, but in particular when it comes to this idea of I have to get an A. And I'm like, oh, you don't have to get an A. Like, that's great if you do, but statistically speaking, we can all agree, statistically speaking, not everyone should get an A. And I get a little pushback from some of my teachers and some of the colleagues, you know, because everyone's got to graduate, and you're also going, yeah, okay, but, you know, statistically speaking, you know, if we're in that bell curve, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. No, you're right. You know, and again, I call it that Lake Woebegone effect, and it's tough. You know, it's tough because, you know, we give our students that false praise, but the reality of it is they know it. They know it too. You know, especially when you pass them along and they don't deserve it. You've like you said, it's learned helplessness, and we've got to find a way to kind of change that culture. And some of it is institutional. And what I mean by institutional is we've overregulated ourselves. We have to look at our whole 504 process. We have to look at, you know, do all these students, do 25 students or 20 students in a class of 30 really need a 504 in 8th grade? You know, I mean, is that true? I mean, if that is true, okay, is there something in the water in Pasco County? You know, what's the issue?
Let me interrupt you real quick, because on that note, I spent some time as a testing coordinator, and the bar for small group or some of the accommodations that we have in the district is so low compared to like College Board, right? So College Board doesn't just simply say that Hugh has an IEP or 504. They want the doctor's notes. They want the test results. They want everything faxed over. I mean, they don't just take your word for it. And it is a process, you know, to get it, to get it approved by them. And then to your point that you were saying earlier, like, at some point, like, they're going to encounter some institution or college where these accommodations are not. And how have we honestly prepared them if we've coddled them or kept them so isolated, so regimented in here, and then they get to college and then it's suddenly, well, we don't have supports. Our college doesn't do any accommodations, you know, and they get to the job and the job's going, I don't know what a 504 is, but I expect you to here at 7 a.m. You're here at 7:05. That's late. That's, one more infraction and you're fired. And they're going, I didn't realize, it was so,
No,
so
no, and there are
strict.
students that need it. I mean, so I want to make
Oh yeah,
sure that
definitely.
there are, but it's, have we overdiagnosed? And the issue that we wrestle with, because I think I wrestle with, and I'd like to look at is, at the end of the day, whose work has increased the most? And that's the teacher. And so now they're not able to meet the needs of the students at the most. And instead of empowering our students to overcome challenges, Lord knows I have challenges. Lord knows my kids have challenges. But are they challenges that they should overcome without accommodations? Absolutely. Are there some students that need accommodation? Yes. But we want to, our teachers are overwhelmed with the amount of those type of issues in a normal classroom. That's not, but again, that's not to say in those issues that are at a kindergarten through grade 3 level are also different than those that are at a
Hmm.
high school level. You
Right.
may need, what I've seen often, unfortunately, is a plan, and I know they get evaluated every year, but they rarely change. Those accommodations
Hmm.
that were equipped early on, which may have been really needed, are they really needed now in 9th grade, 10th grade? Or are we just kind of, because of the workload, just kind of flipping these things through? And at the end of the day, whose work time have we eaten up? And that's the teachers in the classroom's work time. So, but anyways, I know that's just one of the many issues that are out there.
Well, yeah, I wanted to briefly pivot, and to some degree, like even with like in the IEP or 504 conversation, like if you have a kid, and there are plenty of students that I've worked with that legitimately need that at kindergarten,
Yes,
first grade,
absolutely.
right? And then, but tracking 10, 11, 12 years later, to your point, I'm not sure how much has changed. I read an article about Pasco County and their budget is Pasco County schools budget that they're put forward, I think is close to $2 billion. And so long term, talking like long term, right? Where do you see Pasco County moving? Because when I read that article, I did not think Pasco County schools $2 billion. Like I don't know. I think New York City, I think LA, I think Chicago, Miami. I think like large, and maybe it's because Pasco County is somewhat spread out, and so it's not as urban as some of these other districts. But for $2 billion, there's a lot that's at stake. Not only just when it comes to the education, which we focused on, but like teacher satisfaction, teacher
Mhm.
retention. I mean, that's been a struggle
Yeah.
before COVID. After COVID, it's been particularly difficult, and things like this. So I wanted to get kind of just end with some of what you are planning or would like to implement for your term if you are elected as superintendent.
Sure. Well, thanks. And one, I think you hit the nail on the head. Pasco is changing dramatically. If you want to say we are going through adolescence right now, meaning like we are becoming an adult. I mean, when you look at the growth that is occurring, anyone who drives down 54, 56, and 52, you could see the growth that is coming. Just to put in context, for the whole county, Pasco is averaging about 3,000 new students a year right now. 3,000 new students. When you think like an elementary school has 500 students, what is that? That's like 6 new schools a year that we have to build just to keep up with elementary size. I mean, and that's every
Hmm.
year that's happening. And that is a unique problem, by the way. And the reason why I say that, my superintendent colleagues that are up north, they're decreasing student enrollment. I mean, they're decreasing by 2 to 3% a year, their enrollment. They're closing schools in New York and New Jersey and Ohio and Michigan and up the north. But Florida, we're growing. So we are in an adolescent phase. We are changing who we are. We are, to a lot of some folks' chagrin, we are not just going to be a bedroom community anymore. We're not just the rural little brother of Pinellas or Hillsborough. With Moffett coming in, you have a
Hmm.
huge high-end medical research facility that's coming into our area that is the size of Tampa, that's moving to the center part of our county. And that's why you see all this growth that is coming here. And it's not going to stop for the next 10 years. And what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to see? Kind of the big issue, kind of the like North Star is what I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see Moffitt hiring individuals from outside of our community because our talent pool isn't prepared. Meaning like our kids deserve to work at Moffitt. Our kids deserve to have the high-end jobs. Our kids deserve to own the businesses that provide the services. Our kids deserve to be the tradespeople that are in the homes in those areas. But what I don't want to happen is if you talk to these employers, they're hiring or potentially hiring outside of our area because we're still kind of focused a little bit more of where we are the way we used to be. Now, I'm not saying the way we used to is all bad. We had some very good things and we take the best things. But again, like like I said with the Wayne Gretzky, we got to skate to where the puck is going. And where is that puck going? Number one, I'll tell you the number one thing for me. And it's just kind of the fundamental bedrock that we have to address right now. It's the immediate crisis, and that is literacy. We have to address literacy, and we have to address it now. We are at a crisis level here in Pasco and beyond Pasco, but I'm focused here on Pasco. When you look at some of the schools here in West Pasco, or even El Pasco, we have, I believe, is about 32 of our 55 elementary schools where less than 50% of the students are reading at grade level. And in West Pasco, we have schools that are under 20%. So that means 4 out of 5 elementary students in some of these schools are not at grade level. And to me, this is like a builder who's building a skyrise. You're scaffolding. And if you don't have mastery at the fundamental levels, when you get to the upper levels, the first story, you could probably go to the second story and you're at 50% secure. But when you get to like level number 4, grade 5, and you're still at 50% literacy, that whole building's going to collapse. And so it's not the school's fault. It's not teachers' fault. It's a culture issue. We've changed from a reading culture to, and I'm going to hold it up here, to one of these cultures, where we've digitized, and that's the reason why I was really pushing hard behind the scenes and in front in the papers last 2 years. We must have stronger cell phone regulations. That's not a cure-all. It's not a silver bullet, but our kids are phone addicts. They cannot understand complex text. I mean, they've literally, if it's not an emoji, we can't read. And if you can't have strong literacy at those younger ages, we're going to have problems. So number one is literacy. We have to get the science of reading to go embedded in those younger grades. One of the things that you probably know, like you said, you're an English teacher, is we've required all of our English teachers now to have a reading endorsement. And I understand. But the reality of it is I don't want to say it's too late because that sounds so nefarious, but that's the wrong end of the spectrum that we should be focusing on. We've got to get mastery at the younger grades.
Let me interrupt real quick. I totally agree. So I took the test, and for those that don't have any idea, like the reading test, that as a secondary, I have a secondary English certification because I was an English major, so I had to get the alternative certification for it. The reading test that I have to take is something that like an elementary school teacher would have to take.
Yes.
And it breaks it down to like syllabication and pronunciation. Like it's not things that I was ever exposed to as an English major because we're not phonetics and things like this. And honestly, it's not something in the classroom that I have the resources in the curriculum or the time when I've got 30 something students. And you're right. Honestly, at this point, if I have a 10th or 11th grader that is reading grade levels below, I don't have the time, nor do I have the material to break it down. I mean, if I'm reading Romeo and Juliet or some Shakespearean text or just a regular article, I don't have the time to break them down. So yeah, to your point, like it is almost too late at that stage to really address the reading gaps of students. And I'll let you continue, but I think to some degree with the cell phones and that's a culture issue that has to shift at home with the parents, because as a teacher, I will fight more with the student to get the phone up into the holder. But mom and dad are also just as complacent about when I call them about the refusal to give up the cell phone. And then it's like, well, okay, yeah, it's just very passive, and it's not a big deal, you know.
It's a huge deal. I mean, and you're right. It's hard to swim upstream in this culture because the science behind it is so new. But I'm a big fan of Jonathan Haidt, and if you look at what our students with the technology, the cell phone, social media, it literally is rewiring our students the ability to think and to critically problem solve. And if any place should have focused attention, it should be schools. I mean, you look at the average, the research shows that the average student is interrupted once every 8 seconds with some sort of message in high school through their cell phone. And we're saying, yeah, and we want you to read we want you to read Adam Smith's The Cause and Effect of Wealth of a Nation. We want you to read complex text and understand it and have a deep discussion. And we're not even talking about, this is, again, I get worked up about it. We're not even talking about the mental health issues, that the depression, the suicide. Their brains just aren't capable of processing it at that level. And again, I'm not attacking anyone or blaming anyone, but the research is coming. It's like thalidomide in the 1950s. We didn't know. We didn't know what it did. We didn't know what it did. We're starting to see what it does. I'm convinced 20 years from now, we're going to be like, yeah, we did that with our middle schoolers. We let them have like that in middle school. Like, what were we thinking? So those are the kind of, that's not what we're looking at. I mean, literacy is the kind of the focal point doing. And there's so many issues, but literacy pathway, CTE, post-secondary for everyone. That doesn't mean 4-year university though. In high school, looking at those issues. And I'll end with this and saying it is a long journey. And my hope is, if I'm successful and allowed to do it, I'm able to take the baton. And I am not a critical person. I don't sit you will never hear me criticize previous administrations. Why? Because they had so much to deal with. But my hope is that I can take the baton and move it down the track for a while and have great results to make teachers feel empowered, to have students achieve better, to have more customized education for our students, to create an environment where we have creativity, where we can focus on content, where we can have customization, we didn't even talk about collaboration, but where our students can collaborate together, because I believe that's the new economy, is the collaboration economy of working together, working on those issues and move that forward, and hopefully in 4 years or 8 years, hand it off to someone else. And the reason why I say that in such a short term like there is what folks don't realize. If you look at appointed superintendents, not elected, but appointed superintendents usually only last less than 2 years. And we are fortunate. I do like the elected superintendent model. And here's the reason why. Is because you do get stability for 4 years. You're allowed to say, okay, here's where we're going for 4 years. And then it allows a proper time for our constituency to evaluate, is this where we want to keep going? Have we done a good job? Is this what we need to do? One of the things that I am concerned about, as outside of Pasco, is when you have turnover every 18 months, it's the latest topic. Someone complains about something in there, and boom, the superintendent's out, and you get someone in, and as you know, it takes 3 months for new things to start to kind of turn into. And I believe you want that continuity for a little while, but that's up to the voters to decide on how they want to do it. So those are some of the issues that we're working on. And I'll end with this, saying this is I'm out there working hard. This is a passion of mine. Win or lose, I'm not going anywhere. I've been doing this for 30 years here in Pasco. I started the school 25 years ago. We've got 6 campuses. I want to take that same innovation that we've allowed to have and allow the traditional public schools to have it. Nothing would make me happier to see every school have 3,000 students trying to get into that school. Why? Because that means all schools are achieving well. And that's the vision that I would love to have to impart and to bring people on board with as we move forward.
Well, that's great. If there are people that want to know more about you and about your platform, do you have a website, or is there somewhere they can get information about you?
Yeah, I mean, I always say the easiest thing to do is just Google Dr. John Legg, and it'll pop up right on Google. But drjohnlegg.com, it's there. They can email me. Happy to get back with them. And I always say this: happy to do email, but I'd rather do phone calls. Because I find, like, let's just talk. Let's have conversations about what's happening out there, and happy to get the email and set up a time. But this is not an election. I always say, like, it is an election in November. This is a conversation over the next 6 months of where do we want Pasco to be over the next 4 years. And I say this, it's not about me getting elected. I could care less about being in an elected office. I've done that. I've had that badge. I have kids. I'm happy. But it's about where do we want to go in Pasco. I've already won, and I don't mean the election. I've already won by being able to go and speak and talk about these issues and have these conversations, because that's what causes long-term change. And, we're speaking about 2 to 3 different groups a week. They're usually small groups, civic associations, Rotaries, you name it. Any place that have us, we go and we have, I call it conversations. I am not a person on a white horse that's going to come and save the world, but I am coming to say we need to go to skate where the puck is going. And here's the platform by which I'm going to hopefully lead us to get to that direction.
Well, thank you, Dr. Legg. It's been a pleasure to have you, and best of luck. And
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you.